Hello everyone, and welcome to Behind the Scenes here at the MUNCH Museum. My name is Zinata Midi and I am an art educator from the museum. As you might know, we're closed now due to COVID-19, but we're taking you behind the scenes to show you how we work here in the different departments. And you might also know that we're moving to the new MUNCH Museum, and to do this we have to pack and transport and also digitize the collections that we have here. I'm lucky enough to be working with many knowledgeable people here, and one of them who we will meet today is Iglebæk Thue.
Thank you, Sinat. Part of the moving process has been to go through our collection, and we are soon finished digitizing all of Munch's artworks. We have already published Munch's drawings online, so next up is his most famous paintings and graphical works.
But I'm also wondering, we have lots of other things here other than his paintings. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, we have quite a unique collection. We have, for instance, Munch's library, his furniture, and even his hat.
And what are we going to look at today?
Today, we are going to have a look at his family photos.
Okay, let's get them out. So, Sivert, could you tell us a bit about who we're looking at here? What we're looking at?
Well, these are Munch's family members, and they appear in a lot of his paintings. So often when people see a painting by Munch, they want to sort of connect the motif with what happened in the artist's life. And that is only natural. I mean, Munch had a very exciting and dramatic life, and he knew a lot of interesting people. But sometimes I feel that this way of looking at the art might get in the way of the really great themes in his art that is all about human existence, with death, sickness, love, and anxiety. But we as researchers, we spend a lot of time digging into Munch's life and who, why, and where, because it depends on if you're looking at the painting as an historical object or as a work of art.
So I'm curious about these people who we are seeing here.
Yes.
Who's this man over here?
So this is Christian Munch, Edvard Munch's father. So he came from an academic family. His father was a provost in the city of Skien, and later in Christiania, which Oslo was called at that time. So Christian Munch, he worked as a military doctor. It was not very well paid, and he needed a private practice as well. So he had a nervous disposition, and sometimes great enthusiasm would mix with anxiety and nervousness, and that didn't always create such a great environment for kids.
No, I believe that. So how was this father-son relationship between Edvard and Christian?
Well, above all, Christian Munch was a very religious person, and I think that sometimes he was worried about Edvard's choice of career. I mean, painting after nude models, it was not considered appropriate. But he also had other sides. I mean, I mentioned that he had this nervous disposition, and that also bothered him greatly at work when he worked as a doctor. So sometimes his hands would start to shake if he was going to do stitching, and he didn't like to see the sight of grave injuries. But he also had another side, and ghost stories. It was a speciality, and he knew the Norwegian sagas by heart, and he also loved to tell fairy tales.
So a complex relationship, I would say. But how about his mother? Do we have her here?
Yes, right here. Laura Jølstad. She was quite a few years younger than Christian. But the letters we have in our collection reveals that they had great relationship with letters that filled with love and compassion. But unfortunately, she had poor health, and she died of tuberculosis, like so many others, at the time when Edvard was about 5 years old.
Oh, but I believe that there's a heroine in the story after the mother dies. Who is this person?
That's Karen Bjørstad, or Tante Karen, Aunt Karen. Let's see if I can get the picture up here. What would Edvard have been without Karen Bjørstad? She took over the family household after Edvard's mother died. And with all those kids and a tight economy, it couldn't have been easy. But Karen also had artistic talents. She made pictures herself. In the beginning, most of them were sold to charity, but later she found out that they were quite popular, and she sold them, and it contributed to the family's economy.
So did her artistic interest, did that rub off on Edvard Munch? Did that affect his decision to become a painter, an artist?
Well, Karen is known for having supported Edvard a lot, and for having seen his talent in an early age.
But here we have one person in particular. Who is this young man?
Well, this is the artist himself. This is Edvard Munch when he was about 16 years old. So he hadn't yet decided to become an artist. He was still in school. He had a hard time finishing school, experienced a lot of illness, so he had to stay home a lot. Later he would have 1 year of technical school. But then, around the age of 17, he decided to become an artist.
And this is very interesting because one of the questions I receive is, did he become famous immediately after he made this decision?
No, he didn't. Plain and simple. Well, he didn't sell much for the first years of his career. Almost nothing. That was not until later, I think, about 1909, when he came back from abroad, after many years abroad, mostly in Germany, that he really started to succeed, at least financially. I mean, artistically, he had already created masterpieces.
And who is this young man down here?
That is the artist's brother, Petter Andreas Munch. But in the family, they only called him Andreas. He was actually named after the famous Norwegian historian P.A. Munch, which was the father's brother. So Christian, he ended up as a medical doctor, so sort of followed in his father's footsteps. So after he was finished with school, he went to Lillehammer and set up a practice. And there he met a girl called Johanne, and they fell in love and got married, and they had one child, Andrea. But then they went up north, and unfortunately there Andreas got sick with pneumonia, and he died in 1895.
Oh, what a tragic end. So he followed in his father's footsteps, and he was artistic in his way, as his brother as well.
Yeah, he was. Actually, in the beginning, when Edvard used the family members as models, Andreas would complain that it was hard to get a finished drawing from Edvard. So he might have been one of the first persons to criticize Edvard for making unfinished art. As you know, it was not going to be the last time. But Andreas had artistic talent as well. So a sketchbook that belongs to a private owner shows us that he was a really good draftsman. There we can see buildings and cities and landscapes captured in great detail.
Beautiful.
Maybe that was one of the reasons for criticizing Edvard.
That might be.
He wanted more details.
So that's his brother, but what about his sisters? What about
Laura?
this person?
Yes. So this is Laura. Some of the paintings that Edvard Munch made with Laura as a model, they are quite disturbing, actually. She was known for being very sensitive and sort of nervous, like the father in the family. And she had some odd ideas about stuff. And one anecdote comes to mind. When she did a test at school, she insisted that the good results must come from cheating. And obviously she didn't cheat. She was also a very religious person, like the father and mother.
Oh dear. And he had another sister, did he not?
Yes, two actually, but let's have a look here first. This is the eldest one of the kids. This is Sophia. She's not very old here, I think about 5 or 6 years old. But unfortunately, she too died from tuberculosis. So this was very hard for the whole family, of course, and Edvard maybe in particular. He was about 14 years old at the time when she died, and her death became the motif for several of his famous paintings, especially one, The Sick Child. So when we are discussing this sick child, I want to show you something here.
Another secret.
Another secret. Well, not many people get to see these. Just find the right drawer here. Okay, let's see. So this is actually a copper plate.
Wow.
Made for the etching of the sick child. This is from 1896. But Edvard would return to this motif again and again. He made the first painting of the sick child in 1885-86, and even in the late 1920s he would continue to paint this motif. We also have other motifs that depict Sophie's death, like Death in the Sick Room, for instance. That's quite famous.
So this copper plate, is this the only copper plate, or is it the only printed?
Well, he made both etchings and lithographies and paintings and drawings of that motif.
And so we come to the last sister, the sister who also dabbled in amateur photography. Could you show us her?
Yes, she was also a piano teacher. And that is Inger. Let's see here. She was the youngest one of the children. So both Edvard and Inger lived to be old age. So Munch also made several famous paintings with Inger as a model. one might perhaps expect that they had a lot of contact, and in a way they did, but in the later years, I think it was mostly limited to correspondence. We have a lot of letters from Inger to Edvard and from Edvard to Inger. Mm. They were both strong personalities, and Inger had her own ideas about how stuff should be. So,
despite their differences, she did contribute to the collection we have as well, did she not?
That's right. So part of the collection we have comes from Inger.
Fantastic. Okay, Sivert, that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much for showing us these fantastic personal photographies of the Munch family.
Thank you, Sinat.
And thank you so much for following us here. Please take care of each other, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon again. Bye.
Hello, friends of Viking. Thank you for joining me earlier in the archives, where we had a look at some of Munch's family photos. Now I'm here for this questions and answers session. So feel free to send me your questions. I see that some have come in already. My name is Sivert Thue. I've been working with the MUNCH Museum since 2006 with Munch's written material, Munch's drawings, and his graphical works. I also worked in the education department. So let's see. We have one here from Joni, New York. Thank you for your question. Were there other members of his family who were artistically gifted? Well, I felt that when I was down in the archive and talking, I felt that I said all the time that he also was artistically gifted, and she was gifted, and so both Aunt Karen, Edvard's aunt, and Andreas, his brother, and also Sophie, they were all drawing and painting. I believe that drawing and painting actually was an activity that they took part of in the family. It was something they did. Often when I think the father was reading fairy tales or stories, it was something they would do, sort of illustrate what he was reading. Okay. Let's see, other questions. It's a good one from Bart in Los Angeles. Why are these photographs in a drawer and not exhibited in the museum somewhere? We have a pretty enormous collection. So over 6,000 drawings and 18,500 prints, for instance. And we have also a lot of photographies, Munch's own photographies. That's about 230 of them, I believe. And then we have these. So to answer your question, we need a bigger place, and soon we will have a new museum, and hopefully we will find a nice spot for them there. Okay, next question. Okay, what was the religion of his family? Did the artist ever embrace religion later in his life? That's a very interesting question from Jeanette in Michigan. Okay, so there were Christians and kind of strict as well, I believe. So when it comes to Munch's own opinions and if he embraced religion later in life, I think it was more, believe we can say that he was a spiritual person, but not exactly a question in that way, I believe. Yeah. Hope that answered your question. So we have a lot of interesting writings. If you go to emunch.no, you can see some of his writings and search for instance, religion and yeah, the words that you want to search for. You can go in there and do that. So, next question. Okay, so here we have a question from John in San Diego. Munch was a photographer himself. Would you say any of the photographs he took would have been of any artistic value today, if it was not known that he was the photographer? That's kind of a hard question. I believe that his photographs have a lot of artistic value, but at the same time, I mean, today we have so many people taking photographs, so maybe some of them might have, you know, drowned in this gigantic flow of media that we have today, and it took a lot of time for him to establish himself as an artist. But yeah, I think we could say that they would. I think they would really stand out, actually, some of them. But some of them also are, you know, some say that Munch took some of the first selfies where he held the camera like this and took pictures of himself. And if you didn't know he was one of the first, then maybe they would not have been that interesting, no? Okay, hope that answered your question. Let's see. This is a question from Bill at Windsor. Thank you for your presentation and opportunity to learn about Munch's personal side. Well, you're welcome. Were any of the family members models for Woman with Puppies or Two Women in the Garden? We don't actually know who was the model for Woman with Puppies. So that painting, which is quite popular actually, a lot of people ask about it, and I don't think it was exhibited much in Munch's time. So that's interesting. So that is one painting that has grown in popularity. So we don't even know exactly when to date it. So because we don't actually know who the model is, so we just know that it is from the garden at Ekeli. That answered your question. Here is one from John in London. How did you get into your profession? Were you always passionate about it? Did you go to university to specialize in what you do? I studied at the University of Oslo, where I studied art history and literature and history of ideas. So yeah, I was quite passionate about it. So one of my first memories when going into art history was seeing the Scream. I often go back to that, and I saw it when I was a kid, and it meant a lot to me when I saw it. I was walking through a museum and the National Gallery in Oslo, and suddenly I stopped with this painting, and I'd seen all these other paintings with nature and mountains, and I was like, okay, this is really nice paintings. And then I stopped at the Scream, and I realized that, wow, this painting has so much. So when I started studying later on, I always remember that sort of childhood memory. And when I started with art history, it was I really wanted to know more about Munch and his art. So I started at the museum. Okay. Let's see. Who inherited Munch's estate since he did not have any children? This is from Harriet in Cambridge. Well, I believe the city of Oslo actually bought it in the late 40s. Yeah. And but you can, even if the villa is not there anymore, it's a very nice place to go. So if you visit Oslo, it's highly recommended. You have one of his studios left there, and you can see sort of some of the nature, and it's a bit like you can walk into some of Munch's motifs. This is a question from Jerry in Kent. Do you know if Munch was closer to some of the family? Did certain of them have a specific influence of him? Well, like I said in the archive, I believe that his aunt, Karen Bjørstad, Aunt Karen, was very important to him in many ways. She inspired him to draw and to paint, and she recognized his talent at an early age. I mean, there is one anecdote that comes to mind. Munch was outside in the streets and playing, and there he had seen, I believe it was some blind people walking up the street. And when he came back in home, he took out some charcoal from the oven and he started drawing on the floor and even on the walls, I believe. But instead of going, "Oh, what are you doing? Stop that immediately, you're ruining the house," they were like, "Wow, this is so good, you have have a real talent." So I believe she encouraged him in many ways. Also later in life, when Munch was out traveling, he had this, he had an enormous responsibility for his family. I mean, also economically. After the father died in 1889, he was supposed to sort of support his family economically, but Aunt Karen always tried to make sure he had everything he needed for his studies, and they lived on a low budget, and she made the sort of wheels go around in the family while he was abroad and studying and working. Okay. That's the next question. So this is also from Jerry in Kent. He's talking about if Van Gogh was an inspiration to Edvard. he's referring to an exhibition that was held in Amsterdam in 2015. Are there any specific connections of the two that have been noted? Well, yes, I think Munch definitely saw some of Van Gogh's art, and he was influenced by it, and also Van Gogh as an artist. We have one painting where where Munch paints sunflowers. It's called Leading Man with Sunflowers, I believe. And I think that is a kind of tribute to Van Gogh, where he sees himself as the same type of artist. And also in some of his writings, he writes that Van Gogh's fire was burning strongly. It was, and it sort of burned him out, and a bit like me or something like that, he writes. So he sees himself as, in a way, a related artist. But while Van Gogh paints more of what he sees, Munch has this saying that he doesn't paint what he sees, he paints what he saw. So he's often using his memory as a reference there, going back to, you know, his mother's death, his sister's death, and different experience at the gambling table in Monaco with the roulette, and how he saw the people there. So he's a painter of memories. Okay, next question here. This is from Tony in Springfield. How did Munch manage to keep duplicates of all his art? Did he paint the duplicates prior to selling a painting? That's an interesting question. So I don't know if he had duplicates of all his art, but of his most important paintings, he had, more or less. So actually, for a very long time, Munch did not want to sell paintings. He wanted to sell prints. So buyers sometimes have to sort of beg him to sell, and this was the case with, for instance, The Sick Child, where he sold different versions of it, actually. So sometimes he borrowed a painting back after he sold it, just to paint another version of it. But the interesting thing is that it's not a copy. It's a different version. Sometimes it has a different feel to it. The colors are different, and Munch sometimes describes his working process as crystallization, meaning that the image or what he has in mind crystallizes, and it becomes more and more clear. And becoming more clear, it also becomes, it approaches its essence. It becomes simpler, less details, and so the motive is growing and it's getting smaller at the same time, maybe. So, but when it comes to prints, he also made a lot of prints of the motifs that he found interesting, and they're also quite different from each other. So I encourage you that to go to our website and check out our collection there. There are many examples of prints, and soon I hope that we will have all the prints out. There are quite a number there already, so okay. This is from Max in Oregon. With technology today, do you think the art of drawing and painting, which you say the family used to engage with, like we did when we were young, will be a dying art, so to speak? No. Personally, I do not believe that. But I see that a lot of artists now choose to do digital drawings and digital paintings even, and that's really interesting. I just think that is something we should welcome, and it will bring different flavor to the motifs and the way we view art. But I mean, art is always evolving, always moving, and that so much was the case with Edvard's art as well. I believe that if he was an artist today, he would definitely seek out, okay, what is going on right now? He was looking into the new radical ways of painting and exploring the mediums, and innovation is a key word when it comes to Munch. So yeah. Okay. Next question. I got one here. What is your favorite work by Munch? Well, it is, okay, I have to think a bit. I think I would say it is a drawing, or a gouache actually, which is called Explosion, and it is from 1943. And you can see it if you go to our website and Munch's drawings and write Explosion, and you can see it. It's actually a winter landscape, and in the horizon you see this little yellow dot in the middle of a bluish landscape. And we believe that this comes from an explosion at the Filipstad Wharf during the war in 1943. And Munch saw this cold winter day, and after the explosion he, at least this is what Ingrid Munch, his sister, has told us later, that he went out to paint after he saw the explosion, and he caught a pneumonia. And he actually died in 1944, not long after. So that is one of the last finished works by Munch. So I had to choose work on paper, since I've been working a lot with works on paper, drawings and graphical works. Okay. This is from Peggy in San Diego. You mentioned Munch's sister had a nervous disposition. How would one describe Munch's disposition or personality? Well, when I first started to learn about Munch, I was believing that he was this melancholy, sort of slow-moving guy that created some masterpieces with great effort. But I think now that's totally wrong. I think he had a really buzzing energy. He was, if we look at his production, it's so enormous. And we have anecdotes and books that have been written by people who knew him, and when they visited him, they would say that, okay, art was everywhere, on the floor, on the piano, and on the chairs, and he had 2 radios on at the same time, and several dogs outside barking. So, I mean, it's a long distance between how I started to view Munch and how I look upon him now. And I think he really focused everything on painting. He didn't leave that much time for other activities. It always came first. I mean, he never married. He had good friends though, but often they were part of, you know, culture life, and yeah. Okay. Next one here. Well, I believe that's all. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you again, and I hope that you will join our next museum Monday. Okay, thank you.